Hello and welcome to AppScript Office Hours. I'm Eric Kalita. I'm a member of the developer relations team for AppScript. And this is our weekly episode where we tell you the news about Google AppScript, and we also answer your questions. So let's get started with the release notes. So the AppScript team, we make releases on kind of a regular basis. And we publish a kind of a release notes that gives you a quick overview of what's changed in AppScript over that amount of time. And so we did have a release that came out on the 13th. That was just yesterday. And it's a pretty small release, but some interesting things in there. So the first is that we added the ability to disable SSL certificate validation in the SOAP service. So recently, if you scroll back down through the release notes, you'll see that a couple weeks ago, we made it so that the default for all of our HTTP requests that are made via AppScript to an outbound server, by default now, the SSL certificate of the server that you're making the request to is validated. And if it's not valid, we'll throw an exception. Now, there are some cases where maybe you want to connect to a server, it's your own server, you know that it's yours and it's not compromised, but this SSL cert is just not valid or it's self-signed. In this case, we provided an override in URL fetch, that service, to disable this validation, so you could still make the request. But for the SOAP service, we didn't have that flag. So there's now a flag in there so that if you're making a SOAP request to a server with your own certificate or that you know that you trust, you can disable validation and it'll go through. Also in this release, we fixed a very hot issue, very critical issue for a lot of people, which was that Gmail apps and Mail apps send email function has the ability to pass in a name override. So this is kind of not an email address override, but kind of the display name that shows up in various email clients. And for a while, that was broken, where it was not taking that into account and just showing your default name for your user account, your email account, and now it's working again. So that's been fixed. And that's something that's actually really, I think, a nice usability fix for me is if you've worked with libraries, which is an AppScript function feature that allows you to define a reusable set of code, package it up as a library, and then share it among many other scripts that you have. When you were doing an update to your library, and you cut a new version of your library, that version number wouldn't show up in the dialog for other scripts for sometimes 5 or 10 minutes. The caching was too long. So they've now removed that so that when you make an update to a library, it shows up as being available in other scripts almost immediately. So I think those are some pretty cool features and fixes. And yeah, stay tuned to the release notes page for more information about releases that are coming up. So something that didn't make the release notes, but it is also an interesting piece of news, is that we have added the ability to change the display URL for the Chrome Web Store apps that you publish via AppScript. So AppScript has the ability to automatically, very easily, just a couple clicks, publish a web app that you've made and publish it to the Chrome Web Store. And so this integration has been around for a little while. But we've now upgraded it a little bit. So what it was before is that when I published to the Chrome Web Store, the URL that showed up is kind of like this web app comes from, and it would typically show your company's URL. Since all AppScript web apps are hosted off script.google.com, it would show your exceedingly long script.google.com URL as the kind of validated or verified URL in the Chrome Web Store. And while this is true, while that is where your script's being served from, it doesn't really serve the purpose of that field, which was to kind of give, perhaps your company's kind of approval for this web app. Like, okay, this web app was made by, mysite.com, and therefore whatever credibility my site has is then, given to that web app in the Chrome Web Store. So what we've allowed you to do now is for any URL that you own, a verified URL that belongs to your account, you can now use that instead of the script.google.com URL. So if you look at my sample app that I created in the Chrome Web Store, Feed Plus, you'll see before where it used to have script.google.com / / et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it now just says erickalita.com, since that is a domain that I own. And so this is a little tweak, but we think it's an important one for two reasons. Like I said, it allows you to take whatever trust or credibility that you have in your domain and apply it to your app created in AppScript. But more importantly, this display here of how many users have installed it, that actually got pushed off the screen before. There wasn't enough screen real estate to fit both the really long script URL and that piece of data. So it actually allows this, I think, important piece of data of how many users you have to come back into the screen. So that's another thing that we've done recently that we think makes AppScript even a better platform for building web apps. Specifically, a web app like Feed Plus, which is small, targeted, and you want to utilize some Google services. We think that's a good use case for AppScript. All right, so that's about all the news we have for today. Let's answer some questions. So do we have anybody in the Hangout? See, nobody in the Hangout. Aw. All right, so we are broadcasting a special date and time today. So I expected that people might not have got the memo in time. But we do have a question on our moderator page that someone submitted beforehand, so we can take a look at that. So the question here is, I'd love to expand the integration of some of the Google apps and workflows we are building deeper into the Google APIs. And he says, no, OAuth 2.0 is a bummer. Should I continue to call App Engine, or will it make my year to have that come down the pipe sometime soon? So we do have, AppScript has the deep integration with a lot of different Google services, right? So we have spreadsheets and contacts and calendar and Gmail. And a lot of those are bundled up into what we call the default services. And the default services are things that have easy to use kind of custom AppScript interfaces for. And then we also expose a series of what we call Google API services. These are ones that are kind of existing APIs that you can use outside of AppScript that we've kind of just made it a little bit easier to use within AppScript. It's still very much based on the same external format that you would have seen if you would use it externally. So it's the same method names, the same object names. It's not kind of a rewrite of the API. It's the API directly, which is kind of built into AppScript. And we have those for a couple other services, like the URL shortening service, and the Tasks API, I believe, is implemented that way. But there's still a bunch more Google services that aren't present in that list and that you may want to use. And many of those do require OAuth 2.0. And in the past, when we've said you want to integrate with a Google service that's not currently in AppScript or a third-party service, the recommendation is use URL fetch, right? It's a generic ability within AppScript to make a request to a URL, get back the results. If it's JSON, you can parse it. If it's XML, you can parse it, etc. But yeah, the bummer here, as the person pointed out, is that URL fetch doesn't support OAuth 2.0 today. And OAuth 2.0 is definitely the standard for authorization and authentication that a lot of APIs are moving to, both outside of Google and within. So it is something that we're aware of, that there's a lack of this feature and that it would be nice to have. But at the moment, there's no kind of immediate timeline or plans that I can give for when we could expect to see that in AppScript. But it's definitely something that we're looking towards. And we definitely want to make it available just so that these kind of use cases are there and are possible. All right, so I don't see any other questions here. And do we have anybody else in the Hangout? Looks like a no. All right, well, this could be a very short episode of AppScript Office Hours today, but let me just end it with a few more announcements. So one is that one of my colleagues, Arun, who works here in our New York office as well, tomorrow, November 15th, that's correct, he will be hosting a Hangout on Air, which is an introduction to Google AppScript. Now this is being run by the Google Enterprise team, but it's open to anybody who wants to tune in and watch, because a Hangout on Air is broadcast via YouTube so that anyone can watch it live inside their Google Plus stream. So if you are someone who's new to AppScript and you didn't understand the first half of this office hours today, this would probably be a good place to go. Arun is a great presenter, and he'll take you through kind of at a higher level what AppScript is, what its capabilities are, why you'd want to use it, and I think he's even going to show off some of the capabilities and just how easy it is to get started. So if you're new to AppScript, tune in tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, as you can see here. And I think it'll be recorded, so if you missed that specific showing, you can go back and watch it later. And then keeping on with the things that we're doing here on the team, also tomorrow, at a very similar time, 2:30, so these will be competing with each other, is another AppScript presentation that's Ikai and a colleague on Nick on the analytics team are going to be doing together, where they're going to specifically cover the integration between Google Apps Script and Google Analytics. So we did a blog post, a guest post from Nick a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or two, showing off his really nice integration between AppScript and Analytics. It's available in the script gallery, so you can play with it there. I think it's called. It's got the word magic in it, and it almost is magic. If you're an analytics user, these abilities are pretty cool. But it allows you to really quickly define like reports and on your analytics data and bring them into a Google spreadsheet. And then once they're in a spreadsheet, you know the kind of capabilities you have: the collaboration, creating charts, sharing your data, doing calculations. Pivot tables. There's a lot of power there. So this is a really cool integration and a really cool way to kind of keep the data fresh too. Because you could do a one-time export for some data, but with this integration, you can have it on a recurring basis. So that was a really popular blog post he put out and a really popular script. And so we're just going to dive even deeper to it in a Google Developer Live episode tomorrow, 2:30 Eastern Time with Ikai and Nick. So if you're an Analytics Power user or you want to know more about this integration, I'd say tune into that as well. And likewise, it's going to be recorded, so if you want to watch both, don't worry. You can always watch one of them after the fact. All right. Don't see any more questions. Don't see more Hangout participants. I think that's going to wrap it up for today. Once again, I'm Eric Kalita, and this has been AppScript Office Hours. Tune in again next week, and if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us on Stack Overflow or on Google+. Thanks for joining.